People keep asking the same question everywhere I go. Who will dominate the future? Some say America will always remain number one. Others believe China's size and speed make it unstoppable. But very few dare to imagine that the smallest lion in Asia, a country you can cross from one side to another in less than an hour, could quietly outperform them all. And yet, if you look carefully at the numbers, at the mindset, at the way this nation moves, you will realize the truth that most of the world ignores. The future doesn't always belong to the biggest. The future belongs to the most disciplined, the most consistent, the most determined. And when you measure those qualities, Singapore stands in a class of its own. Think about this, a country with no oil, no gold, no vast farmlands, no mountains of natural resources. By nature's lottery, Singapore should have been a weak player in the global game. But by choice, by vision, and by relentless execution, it has built one of the strongest economies in the world. Today, it is not just a financial hub, it is a symbol of how clarity of purpose and discipline can turn limitations into power. And in 2025, when the world is distracted by political drama and economic noise, Singapore will quietly do what it has always done best: outperform expectations. I want you to think very carefully about this. The United States has influence, but it is deeply divided. China has scale, but it also has friction. India has potential, but it still fights battles of infrastructure and inequality. But Singapore has mastered the art of being small yet significant, quiet yet powerful, invisible yet essential. That is why the question we should be asking is not if Singapore will win, but how brutally it will prove the world wrong in the next 2 years. And here's the challenge I place before you today. For the next hour, open your mind. Forget the size of nations. Forget the slogans of politicians. Forget the headlines that change every morning. Instead, look deeper into the principles that actually decide the future. Because what you will discover is not just 10 reasons why Singapore will outperform the world in 2025. What you will discover are 10 brutal lessons for every leader, every business, and every individual who wants to survive the chaos of this century. So ask yourself this: if a small island with no natural gifts can become one of the strongest players on the global stage, then what excuse do you have in your own life, in your own business, in your own country? The story of Singapore is not just about one nation. It is a mirror for all of us. And if you dare to listen closely, these 10 reasons will not only explain Singapore's rise, but also reveal the hidden map of how you too can rise when the world least expects it. The first brutal reason Singapore will outperform the world is discipline. Discipline in governance, discipline in planning, and discipline in execution. Most countries are full of great speeches, promises, and short-term excitement, but they struggle with consistency. One leader comes and the strategy changes. Another government arrives and the vision collapses. But Singapore is different. It was built on the idea that discipline is not a moment. It is a culture. When leaders here say 20 years, they mean 20 years. When they design a plan, they don't abandon it halfway because it's difficult or unpopular. They stay the course. This is why Singapore has been able to achieve what larger nations with far more wealth and resources could not. The discipline of following through is worth more than any gold mine or oil field. Let me tell you a truth that many leaders hate to admit. Corruption is the silent disease that destroys nations faster than war. A country may be rich in natural resources, but if corruption controls its decisions, its people will never see prosperity. Singapore knew this early. That is why it built a system where meritocracy and accountability are non-negotiable. Leaders are not allowed to hide behind power. Officials are not allowed to grow fat while the people starve. Here, performance is measured and results are demanded. And that discipline has turned Singapore into a place where trust is stronger than fear and efficiency is stronger than chaos. The rest of the world complains about inequality bureaucracy, and corruption, but Singapore quietly builds step by disciplined step. The second brutal reason is efficiency. In many parts of the world, efficiency is just a word printed in reports. But in Singapore, efficiency is a religion. Look at the airport, look at the port, look at the trains, look at the way services are delivered. You don't see excuses. You don't see delay. You don't see confusion. You see systems that work as if someone's future depends on it. Because it does. Efficiency is not about machines or technology. It is about the mindset that time wasted is life wasted. In Singapore, every process is refined, every step is measured, and every service is designed to work for the citizen, not against them. Let me give you a picture. Imagine two companies. One has 10,000 employees but no discipline. Meetings drag on, projects restart, leaders argue, and nothing moves. The other has only 100 employees but is organized, efficient, and disciplined. Which company will win? You already know the answer. That is Singapore. Small in size, but efficient to the core. When other countries celebrate slogans, Singapore celebrates systems. When others promise speed, Singapore proves it. And when others waste decades in political fights, Singapore quietly finishes the project and moves on to the next one. This is why Singapore will not just survive 2025, it will outperform. Because in a world where politics is chaotic, where nations waste energy in endless debates, discipline and efficiency become the ultimate weapons. And Singapore has both engraved into its DNA. The third brutal reason Singapore will outperform the world in 2025 is geography, but not geography in the lazy way most people think about it. Many nations are blessed with size, with rivers, with land, with oil, and they waste it. Singapore was given almost nothing, a dot on the map, yet it turned that very weakness into unmatched strength. Why? Because it understood that location is not just about land, it is about strategy. Positioned at the crossroads of global trade routes, Singapore decided early on that it would not simply sit there and hope ships passed by. It built the most advanced port systems, created one of the busiest air hubs, and connected itself to every major economy. Today, when goods move between East and West, Singapore is the bridge. When money seeks stability between volatile markets, Singapore is the vault. And when new digital trade corridors open, from blockchain finance to green energy partnerships, Singapore is the connector. Think of it this way. If the 20th century belonged to nations with oil, the 21st century belongs to nations with trust and connectivity. Singapore has no oil fields, but it has the trust of investors. It has no vast land, but it has the digital corridors of the future. It is not the biggest player in trade volume, but it is the most reliable, and in global commerce, reliability is currency. That is why in 2025, when supply chains remain uncertain, when wars and tariffs shake economies, the world will turn not to size, but to stability. And Singapore will once again quietly outperform. The fourth brutal reason is education, but not the education of memorizing and repeating like most of the world still practices. Singapore's education system is not designed to produce dreamers who live in theories. It is designed to produce builders who create realities. When a student here studies technology, it is not for the purpose of passing an exam. It is to apply knowledge directly to solving problems. When universities partner with industries, they are not just chasing research papers. They are building bridges between classrooms and boardrooms. This focus on skills over status is one of the sharpest edges Singapore holds against the rest of the world. Too many countries celebrate the number of graduates they produce, but they ignore the question, can these graduates actually build? In Singapore, the answer is yes. Whether it is coding, engineering, biotechnology, or finance, the system forces students to think about outcomes, not only inputs. That is why Singapore has been able to transform its people into creators of value rather than collectors of certificates. Let me paint a story for you. Imagine a young programmer in Singapore. At 21, he joins a startup, not because it's safe, but because he wants to learn. Within 2 years, he builds a product that gains traction in Southeast Asia. By 25, his company is competing with regional players. This is not an exception here. It is becoming the expectation. Because when the entire system is built to teach you how to decide, how to act, and how to deliver, even the youngest can move faster than the experienced. In other countries, the rest of the world is still arguing about how to fix their outdated education models. Singapore is already producing the builders who will define the next decade. And this is why in 2025, while other nations continue to complain about brain drain and skills gaps, Singapore will quietly reap the benefits of an education system designed not for the past, but for the future. The fifth brutal reason Singapore will outperform the world is its culture of cooperation. Many countries are divided by race, religion, or language, and those divisions slow down progress. In Singapore, difference has been turned into strength. The world meets here, East and West, old and new, tradition and technology. This mixture creates something powerful, hybrid thinking. A Chinese businessman sits at the same table as an Indian engineer and a Malay innovator, all working toward one outcome. When you mix cultures, you mix ideas, and when you mix ideas, you unlock creativity that no single background can produce. That is why Singapore's innovation is not just technical, it is cultural. The rest of the world is stuck in identity battles. Singapore is quietly harvesting diversity into progress. The sixth brutal reason is the ability to turn crisis into opportunity. Look back at history. Every time there was a global recession, Singapore found a way not only to survive, but to reinvent. When financial markets crashed, Singapore doubled down on transparency and became a safe haven for investors. When COVID paralyzed global travel, Singapore reshaped itself with strict systems and technology-driven solutions that made recovery faster than most large nations. Where others see fear, Singapore sees strategy. Where others freeze, Singapore adapts. This resilience is not luck, it is DNA. And in a world where uncertainty is now permanent, the ability to respond faster than others is the difference between decline and dominance. The seventh brutal reason is trust. Trust is invisible but priceless. Companies do not park billions of dollars in a place because it looks attractive. They put their money where they know it will be safe tomorrow and the day after and 10 years from now. Singapore has built trust not by promises, but by decades of keeping its word. Contracts are honored, laws are enforced, and stability is protected. When other countries change the rules halfway, Singapore keeps the rules steady. That is why global corporations set up headquarters here, why investors prefer Singapore banks, and why entrepreneurs from around the world choose to launch in this tiny island nation. Trust is the most powerful currency in the modern economy, and Singapore has more of it than almost anyone else. Think about this carefully. In a noisy world where nations shout about their power, Singapore whispers through consistency. And it is this quiet trust that attracts the loudest flows of capital, talent, and opportunity. While others compete for attention, Singapore competes for credibility. And credibility always wins in the long run. The eighth brutal reason Singapore will outperform the world in 2025 is its technological leap. Many nations talk about becoming smart, but Singapore is one of the few that actually lives it. The Smart Nation vision is not just a slogan on a poster. It is a blueprint being executed daily. Walk through the city and you will notice sensors, systems, and services all interconnected. Healthcare is digitized, payments are seamless, transportation runs on real-time data, and government services are delivered online with a speed most countries can only dream of. Technology here is not decoration, it is infrastructure. And the reason this matters is simple. The world of tomorrow will be decided not by who has the most natural resources, but by who uses data most effectively. On this battlefield, Singapore is already miles ahead. But let me make this very clear. Technology in Singapore is not about robots replacing humans. It is about empowering humans to move faster, make smarter decisions, and focus on higher value. An elderly man paying bills online instead of standing in long queues, a student accessing AI-driven learning tools that personalize education, a business running digital supply chains that cut waste and increase profits. These are not futuristic dreams. They are today's reality in Singapore. When the rest of the world is still debating whether AI is a threat or a tool, Singapore is already building frameworks to use it wisely, fairly, and efficiently. This ability to implement while others hesitate is why Singapore's technological edge will only sharpen in 2025. The ninth brutal reason is the resilience of its private sector. Many people think only about Singapore's government, but the real story is how small and medium-sized enterprises adapt faster than giants. Around the world, SMEs often struggle with outdated methods, lack of digitalization, and limited global access. But in Singapore, the story is different. Here, even the smallest hawker stall understands the power of change. Let me give you a picture. A food vendor, 60 years old, decides to list his dishes on delivery apps. Within months, his local customer base doubles. Soon, his recipes are packaged, branded, and sold online to customers in neighboring countries. One small decision, one small adoption of technology transforms an ordinary stall into a regional brand. This is the DNA of Singaporean business. Never too small to evolve, never too proud to learn, never too late to transform. When global giants take years to make decisions, SMEs here pivot in months. When corporations debate, these smaller players experiment. And this spirit, multiplied across thousands of businesses, creates an economy that is not just resilient, but unstoppable. The world often underestimates small businesses, but Singapore proves that when small businesses adapt, they become the hidden strength of an entire nation. So as the rest of the world worries about automation destroying jobs, Singapore's SMEs are already using automation to create new opportunities. As others fear disruption, Singapore embraces it. And by 2025, this agility at the grassroots level will be one of the sharpest reasons why Singapore outperforms nations 10 times its size. The 10th and final brutal reason Singapore will outperform the world in 2025 is its invisible weapon, mindset. Not technology, not money, not resources, but the mindset of service, unity, and long-term vision. In many parts of the world, people look at politics and see division. They look at leadership and see ego. They look at society and see endless arguments about who is right and who is wrong. But in Singapore, there is a deeper force at work, the collective belief that the mission is bigger than the individual. This mindset has been trained for decades, and it shows in every part of life. Citizens trust the system because the system delivers. Leaders make unpopular decisions because they serve the future, not just the moment. And businesses think not only about quarterly profits, but about long-term stability. This invisible weapon is what the rest of the world often misses. You can copy policies, you can copy technology, you can copy infrastructure, but you cannot copy mindset. A nation either has it or it doesn't. And Singapore has it. That is why it has turned scarcity into strength, diversity into unity, and smallness into significance. In 2025, when the noise of bigger countries fills the headlines, Singapore will once again prove that mindset shapes destiny more than size, and that unity builds futures faster than ego. Now let me bring all 10 reasons together. Discipline in governance, efficiency in systems, strategic geography, builder-focused education, multicultural cooperation, crisis response DNA, trust capital, technological leadership, private sector resilience, and the invisible weapon of mindset. These are the forces that will allow Singapore not just to survive the challenges of the next decade, but to outperform the world. These are not theories. These are brutal realities already visible if you dare to look closely. So what does this mean for you? It means that the excuses we tell ourselves are worthless. If a small island with no resources, surrounded by giants, can become one of the strongest players in the global economy, then you, in your own life, in your own business, in your own journey, have no excuse. You do not need to be the biggest to succeed. You do not need to be the loudest to be heard. You need discipline, efficiency, adaptability, trust, and above all, the mindset to keep moving forward when others quit. Let me leave you with this challenge. The world is entering a time of uncertainty, of crisis, of rapid change. But uncertainty does not destroy everyone. It only destroys those who are unprepared. The prepared see chaos as a ladder. The disciplined see change as opportunity. And the united see crisis as fuel for progress. That is the spirit Singapore represents. And that is the spirit you must adopt if you want to win in your own future. Thank you for listening. Thank you for opening your mind. And thank you for daring to imagine a world where the smallest player can beat the biggest. Take these lessons, apply them in your life, and share them with those who need them most. The future will not wait for anyone. The only question is, will you be ready to outperform it the way Singapore is ready to outperform the world?